Elena's world shattered with a single slap, the sound echoing louder than the laughter at her father's lavish 50th birthday party. Her stepmother's hand stung her cheek, but it was the venom in her words, "You're a disgrace," that cut deeper. At 24, Elena stood frozen, the glittering chandeliers of the main estate mocking her as the room fell silent. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a rare moment when Elena's fractured family gathered under one roof. Her father, Richard, a prominent lawyer in Portland, had insisted on the event, a glittering display of wealth and status. Elena had come reluctantly, knowing her stepmother, Vivian, never missed a chance to remind her she didn't belong. Not since her mother, Claire, died 6 years ago. Not since Elena came out as a lesbian at 18, a truth that Vivian branded as unnatural. But tonight, Elena hadn't expected a public humiliation in front of strangers and family alike. She clutched her stinging cheek, her hazel eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a swarm of judgment. Her father stood across the room, his face a mask of discomfort, saying nothing. Always saying nothing. Elena's heart pounded as she scanned the room for an escape, her gaze landing on Sarah, the caterer she'd met only hours ago. Sarah's blue eyes locked onto hers, fierce and unwavering, a silent promise that someone saw her, someone cared. Elena had noticed Sarah earlier, her confidence magnetic as she moved through the party with trays of hors d'oeuvres. At 27, Sarah was everything Elena wasn't: bold, unapologetic, with a sharp wit that cut through the room's pretension. Her short black hair and leather jacket stood out against the sea of formal wear, and when their hands brushed earlier, passing a glass of wine, Elena felt a spark she hadn't known in years. Now, as Vivian's slap lingered in the air, Sarah's presence was the only thing keeping Elena from crumbling. "Get out," Vivian hissed, her perfectly manicured nails pointing toward the door. "You don't belong here flaunting your lifestyle." The word dripped with disgust, as if Elena's existence was a stain on the family name. Elena wanted to scream, to tell Vivian she wasn't ashamed of who she was, but her voice caught in her throat. She'd spent years trying to please her father, to fit into his new life with Vivian, but it was never enough. Not when she loved women. Not when she refused to hide it. Sarah stepped forward, her tray clattering onto a table. "Hey," she said, her voice low but firm, cutting through the tension. "You don't get to talk to her like that." The room gasped, shocked by the caterer's audacity. Vivian's eyes narrowed, but Sarah didn't flinch. She moved closer to Elena, her presence a shield. "You okay?" she whispered, her hand grazing Elena's arm. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. Elena nodded, barely, her throat tight. She wanted to thank Sarah, to say something, anything, but the weight of the moment pressed down on her. Her father finally stepped forward, his voice strained. "Elena, maybe you should go. For now." The words were a betrayal, softer than Vivian's slap but no less painful. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Without a word, Elena turned and walked out, the cool night air hitting her like a wave. Sarah followed, her footsteps quick and determined. "You didn't deserve that," Sarah said, catching up as they reached the gravel driveway. "None of it." Elena stopped, her breath shaky, and looked at Sarah. For the first time that night, she felt seen, not as a disappointment, but as herself. They stood there, the distant hum of the party fading behind them. Elena's mind raced, replaying Vivian's cruelty, her father's silence, and the years of feeling like an outsider in her own family. But Sarah's presence grounded her, a reminder that she wasn't alone. "I don't know what to do," Elena admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought I could handle it, but—" "You don't have to handle it alone," Sarah said, her voice steady but soft. "You're stronger than they think. And you're not wrong for being who you are." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Elena's chest ache with something new hope. They talked for hours that night, sitting on the hood of Sarah's beat-up van parked by the estate's gates. Sarah shared stories of her own struggles growing up in a small Maine town, coming out to a family that didn't understand, and carving out a life where she could be herself. Elena listened, her heart opening to this woman who seemed to carry her own scars with pride. For the first time, Elena felt a flicker of possibility, a chance to reclaim the parts of herself she'd buried to appease others. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Elena realized she couldn't go back to the life she'd been living. Not after tonight. Not after Sarah. But the path forward was uncertain, shadowed by her family's rejection and the weight of her past. She didn't know it yet, but the key to her freedom lay hidden in a box of her mother's letters, tucked away in the attic of her childhood home. Letters that would unravel secrets, heal wounds, and prove that love was never wrong. The next morning, Elena woke to the ache of last night's humiliation, her cheek still tender from Vivian's slap. She sat on the edge of her bed in her small Portland apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying the moment her father chose silence over her. But Sarah's words echoed louder. "You're not wrong for being who you are." She hadn't expected to see Sarah again so soon, but when her phone buzzed with a text copy, "I'm not letting you face this alone," Elena felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. They met at a cozy cafe by the waterfront, the scent of roasted beans mixing with the salty air. Sarah sat across from her, her leather jacket slung over the chair, her blue eyes searching Elena's face with quiet concern. "You don't have to talk about it," Sarah said, stirring her coffee. "But I'm here if you do." Elena hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. She'd spent so long bottling up her pain, her mother's death, her father's distance, Vivian's cruelty, that the idea of sharing it felt foreign. But Sarah's presence was disarming, her openness a safe harbor in the storm. "I've always felt like I'm fighting to be seen," Elena admitted, her voice low. "My mom was the only one who got me. When she died, it was like I lost the only person who thought I was enough." Sarah leaned forward, her hand resting near Elena's, close enough to feel her warmth. "You are enough," she said. "More than enough." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, from Elena's childhood memories to Sarah's dreams of opening her own catering business. Sarah spoke with a passion that lit up her face, and Elena found herself drawn to her strength, her unapologetic way of existing in a world that often tried to dim her light. When Sarah reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining, Elena's heart raced not with fear, but with a quiet thrill she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. But the weight of the previous night lingered. Elena knew she couldn't keep running from her family's rejection. She needed answers, closure, something to make sense of the pain. That afternoon she drove to her childhood home, a modest house on the outskirts of Portland where her mother's memory still lived. Her father had moved out years ago, leaving the house to Elena, though she rarely visited. It felt too heavy, too full of ghosts. In the attic she found a dusty box labeled "Claire's Things." Inside were stacks of letters, their edges yellowed but the handwriting unmistakably her mother's. Elena's breath caught as she opened the first one, dated a year before her mother's death. The words were raw, intimate, written to someone named Anna. "I love you in ways I can't explain," her mother wrote, "but the world isn't ready for us. I'm sorry I can't be braver." Elena's hands trembled as she read letter after letter, each one revealing a truth she'd never known. Her mother had been in love with a woman. Claire had hidden it, married Richard to fit into a world that demanded conformity, but her heart had belonged to Anna. The letters spoke of stolen moments, secret meetings, and a love so deep it made Elena's chest ache. Her mother hadn't just understood her, she'd lived the same truth, the same struggle. Tears streamed down Elena's face as she realized her mother's silence wasn't shame but sacrifice. Claire had buried her love to protect Elena, to give her a stable life. But the letters also carried a message of hope. "Never let anyone make you feel wrong for who you love," Claire wrote in one. "You are my light, Elena. Be brave where I couldn't." Elena clutched the letters to her chest, her heart a tangle of grief and gratitude. She wanted to call Sarah, to share this discovery, but her phone rang first. It was her father. "We need to talk," he said, his voice heavy. "Vivian. She's sorry. Can you come to the house tonight?" Elena's grip tightened on the phone. She wasn't sure she was ready to face them, but the letters in her hands felt like armor. She agreed, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't let Vivian's cruelty define her anymore. That evening, Sarah insisted on driving her to her father's estate. "I'm not letting you walk into that lion's den alone," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. As they pulled up to the grand house, Elena felt the weight of the past and the promise of the future colliding. With Sarah by her side and her mother's letters in her bag, she stepped out of the car, ready to confront the family that had tried to break her. The grand doors of her father's estate loomed like a judgment, but Elena walked through them with a fire she hadn't felt before. Sarah's hand brushed hers as they entered, a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the chandeliers casting cold light over Vivian's rigid posture and Richard's uneasy expression. "Elena," her father began, standing by the fireplace, "Vivian wants to apologize." Vivian's lips tightened, her apology clearly forced. "I overreacted," she said, her tone clipped. "But you have to understand your choices make things difficult for this family." The word choices landed like another slap, and Elena's fists clenched. She glanced at Sarah, whose eyes burned with quiet fury. "Choices," Elena said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I didn't choose to be who I am. But you chose to humiliate me in front of everyone." The room fell silent, Vivian's face paling. Richard shifted uncomfortably, but Elena wasn't finished. She pulled her mother's letters from her bag, holding them like a shield. "And I'm not the only one you've judged. Mom loved a woman too. Did you know that?" Richard's eyes widened, and Vivian's composure cracked. "What are you talking about?" her father asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena handed him the letters, her hands steady now. "Read them," she said. "Mom hid who she was to protect me, to fit into your world. But she never thought love was wrong. She wanted me to be proud of who I am." As Richard scanned the letters, his face crumpled, a mix of grief and guilt. Vivian scoffed, but her confidence wavered. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Your mother was confused just like you." Sarah stepped forward, her voice cutting through the room. "The only confusion here is thinking you get to decide who's worthy of love. Elena's not broken, and neither was her mother." Elena's heart swelled at Sarah's words, her courage a beacon. Richard looked up from the letters, his eyes glistening. "I didn't know," he said, his voice breaking. "Claire never told me." The admission hung heavy, a confession of his own failures. Elena wanted to be angry, to scream at him for his silence, but she saw the pain in his eyes, the pain of a man who'd lost his wife and never truly known her. "I needed you to stand up for me," Elena said, her voice soft but firm. "Not just last night, but always." Richard nodded, tears spilling over. "I'm sorry, Elena. I failed you." It wasn't enough to erase years of hurt, but it was a start, a crack in the wall between them. Vivian, however, wasn't ready to yield. "This doesn't change anything," she snapped. "You can't just waltz in here with your girlfriend and expect us to accept it." Sarah's hand found Elena's, their fingers interlocking. "We're not asking for your permission," Sarah said, her voice calm but unyielding. "We're here so Elena can be heard. Whether you listen is up to you." Elena felt a surge of strength, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Be brave where I couldn't." She looked at Vivian, then at her father. "I'm done hiding," she said. "I love who I love and I'm not ashamed. If you can't accept that, that's your loss." She turned to leave, Sarah by her side, but Richard called out. "Wait. Please. I want to try." The words stopped Elena in her tracks. She turned, seeing something new in her father's eyes, regret, but also a flicker of hope. "I don't know how to fix this," he said, "but I want to be part of your life. If you'll let me." Elena's throat tightened. She wasn't ready to forgive, not yet, but she nodded. "We'll see," she said, her voice steady. Outside, under the starlit sky, Elena and Sarah stood by the van, the weight of the confrontation settling around them. "You were incredible in there," Sarah said, her smile soft but proud. Elena laughed, a shaky sound. "I couldn't have done it without you." Sarah's hand cupped her cheek, gentle where Vivian's had been cruel. "You're stronger than you know," she whispered, and in that moment Elena believed her. As they drove back to the city, Elena felt the letters in her bag, a tangible link to her mother's love. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was carrying Claire's truth too. But the road ahead wasn't clear. Vivian's rejection still stung, and her father's promise was fragile. Elena knew healing would take time, but with Sarah's hand in hers, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of hope and hesitation. Elena and Sarah grew closer, their connection deepening through late-night talks and quiet moments by the Maine coast. But the shadow of Vivian's slap and her father's belated remorse lingered. A reminder that love, even when true, didn't erase all wounds. Elena threw herself into reading her mother's letters, each one a piece of Claire's heart. Some were joyful, describing stolen kisses with Anna under the stars. Others were heavy with regret, mourning a life Claire felt she couldn't fully live. I want you to have what I couldn't, Claire wrote in one. A love you don't have to hide. Elena traced the words, feeling her mother's presence, her strength. She shared the letters with Sarah, who listened with quiet reverence, her hand a steady anchor as Elena navigated the grief and gratitude. Sarah, too, was opening up. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, she told Elena about her own pasta conservative family who'd called her a sinner, a small town that whispered behind her back. I left because I had to, Sarah said, her voice steady but laced with pain. But it made me who I am. I wouldn't trade that. Elena admired her resilience, the way she wore her scars like badges. It made Elena want to be braver, to live as fully as Sarah did. Her father reached out too, his calls tentative but persistent. They met for coffee, just the two of them, in a small diner far from the estate's opulence. Richard looked older, his face etched with lines Elena hadn't noticed before. I've been reading your mother's letters, he said, his voice heavy. I wish she'd told me. I wish I'd been someone she could trust. Elena saw the sincerity in his eyes, but trust was a fragile thing. I need time, she told him. He nodded, accepting her terms. Vivian, however, remained a wall. She sent a curt email, claiming she'd overreacted, but refusing to acknowledge Elena's identity. This family has standards, she wrote, and Elena deleted the message, her resolve hardening. She wasn't fighting for Vivian's approval anymore, she was fighting for herself. As winter settled over Portland, Elena and Sarah's relationship bloomed. They spent evenings cooking together in Elena's tiny apartment, laughing over burnt pasta and stolen kisses. Sarah's boldness balanced Elena's caution, their differences weaving them closer. One night, as snow fell outside, Sarah pulled Elena into a slow dance in the living room. No music but the rhythm of their hearts. I'm falling for you, Sarah whispered, and Elena's breath caught, her fears melting in the warmth of Sarah's arms. But the past wasn't done with them. One afternoon, Elena received a call from her father's lawyer. There's something you need to see, he said. It's about your mother's estate. Curious and wary, Elena met him at his office, Sarah by her side. The lawyer handed her a sealed envelope, marked with Claire's handwriting. Inside was a letter addressed to Elena, dated just days before her mother's death. My dearest Elena, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, but I need you to know you were my greatest joy. I loved Anna, but I hid it to give you a life I thought was safe. I was wrong. Love is never wrong. There's a trust fund I set up for you, hidden from your father. Use it to live freely, to love fiercely. Be the woman I couldn't be. Tears blurred Elena's vision as she read. The trust fund was substantial, enough to give her independence, a chance to build a life on her own terms. But more than the money, it was her mother's words that set her free. Claire hadn't just loved her, she'd believed in her, planned for her, even in her final days. Elena shared the letter with Sarah, who pulled her close, her voice soft. Your mom was incredible. Just like you. They sat together, the weight of Claire's love settling around them like a warm blanket. Elena knew what she wanted now. A life with Sarah, unapologetic and true. But first, she needed to face her father one last time, to close the chapter that had kept her tethered to pain. Spring arrived in Portland, painting the city in soft greens and blooming hope. Elena stood at a crossroads, her mother's letters and trust fund giving her the courage to rewrite her story. She and Sarah had grown inseparable, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that tried to define them. But one final confrontation awaited, a chance to heal or sever the ties that bound her to her past. Elena invited her father to her apartment, a space now filled with warmth, photos of her and Sarah, books piled high, and the faint scent of coffee. Richard arrived alone, his shoulders heavy with the weight of their history. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, his voice unsteady. About failing you. I want to make it right. Elena studied him, seeing the man who'd once carried her on his shoulders, now humbled by his mistakes. I don't need you to fix everything, she said. I just need you to see me. Really see me. She told him about Sarah, about the trust fund, about her mother's love for Anna. Richard listened, his eyes glistening. I loved your mother, he said. I didn't understand her, but I loved her. And I love you. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Elena felt a weight lift, a bridge forming where a wall had stood. She didn't know if Vivian would ever change, but she no longer needed her approval. Her mother's letters had given her something greater. The certainty that her love was valid, beautiful, and worth fighting for. That evening, Elena and Sarah drove to the beach where they'd first connected. The same one from the image prompt that captured their bond. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the waves. They walked hand in hand, the sand cool beneath their feet. I'm ready, Elena said, her voice steady. To build a life with you. To be who I am, no apologies. Sarah smiled, her blue eyes bright with love. Good, she said, pulling Elena close. Because I'm not going anywhere. They kissed, the world fading around them. Their love a quiet triumph over every voice that had tried to silence them. Elena thought of her mother, of Anna, of the love they'd hidden. She vowed to live openly, to honor their legacy with every step. The trust fund would help her start anew, maybe a small business with Sarah. A home filled with laughter and love. But more than that, Elena carried her mother's truth. A beacon for others who felt alone in their love. As the stars emerged, Elena felt whole for the first time. She wasn't just her mother's daughter or her father's disappointment. She was Elena, loved and loving, fierce and free. And with Sarah by her side, she knew she'd never have to hide again. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.